I am on a mission, and that mission is to slap people upside the head and wake them up and even make them hate me, if that's what it takes to get them to go examine what I'm telling them to find out that it's right. What I'm going to talk to you about today comes from my heart, and I think you need to start examining yourself, your agenda, your mission. Who are you? What are you about? What do you believe about America? Is it true? Are you helping to divide us more? Or are you helping to bring us together? Do you really understand what this country is all about?
Man, it's not the Jews, it's not the Catholics, it's not the blacks. It's these men who belong to the ancient mystery schools, who meet in secret beside the fate of the world. And they belong to all different races and all different nationalities and all different religions to the public point of view. But in secret, it's a different story.
Every secret brotherhood, every secret society, every mystical temple, every occult organization teaches the Luciferian philosophy. Their whole goal with this philosophy is to teach all men and women that the only end of life is to seek the utmost pleasure and happiness that you can get out of it, because when you die, there's nothing else. That's what they teach. That's what they want you to be. There's a method to their madness. There's really not much method to yours, because you're operating from a place of ignorance. And until you change that, you're going to be bumbling around, bumping into each other, saying and doing the wrong things, not understanding the nature of your enemy. And if you don't understand the nature of your enemy and the weapons they use, you cannot fight that enemy. You can't fight the battle. You shouldn't even be on the battlefield. It'll never be turned around until you learn what you need to know. You don't even recognize half the weapons that they use against you. Their whole purpose throughout history has been to teach a small number of people how to become adept at controlling everyone else. Their goal is to destroy all existing religions save theirs, all existing governments save theirs, and shackle the mob in a system of eternal oppressive debt chained to a computer for the rest of their life, in a propagandized world to make them believe that they are happy in this system. Now, do you think they're succeeding? Anytime any system makes you dependent upon anybody or anything or any system, you are enslaved. Understand that. It doesn't have to be chains of iron. The only thing that can stop it is by waking up vast amounts of sleeping people. Sheeple is what they are. Sleeping people.
What do I do, Lord?
Destroy the child. Corrupt them all.
This is their plan, people. These are demons.
People suck. There's too many of them, and they're easier to kill when they're fetuses than when they're grown up.
We just offer our children up to the system with the fluoride, the water, and the GMO hurting them.
So what's wrong with the population? I mean, there's too many people.
On infiltration instead of invasion. On subversion instead of elections.
I'm ugly, I'm falling, I'm taking you with me, sucker. Just like out of Exorcist. Your mother's in hell right now, and I'm gonna get you there too. Just like the Bible says, it's basically an intergalactic invasion into this space through people. I'm telling you, it's what all the ancients said, it's what they warned of, it's what we're dealing with. They're demons. They're frickin' interdimensional invaders, okay? I'll just say it.
It isn't easy to overcome a lifetime of propaganda. You must honestly humble yourself to the possibility that you have been fooled and everything you were taught was a lie. Otherwise, even when you look, you won't see. When you listen, you won't hear. When you read, you won't comprehend. And when you think, you won't ponder. If you cannot first empty your cup, then it is impossible to refill it with pure water. If you cannot first unlearn what you were originally taught, then it is impossible to learn anything new contrary to it. If you cannot first clear your mind of heliocentric indoctrination, you will lack the discernment necessary to recognize the geocentric truth. You have been systematically fed a complex web of lies designed to make you reject your own common sense and lived experience of the world. You have been taught that this notion of flat Earth is something so ridiculous that it should only be laughed at, and that anyone advocating for it must be utterly unintelligent or completely crazy. So your immediate and confident rejection of the notion is no different than your leg extending when hit with a reflex hammer. Your exasperated eye rolls and permanent smirks were programmed into you, as was the list of questions that instantly roll off your tongue, like, but why would they lie? What does it matter? And where are the whistleblowers? All of these, and even more specific questions, like, why is Earth the only flat planet? Why isn't Polaris visible from Australia? And how does the Eratosthenes experiment work on a flat Earth? All have valid, sound answers from a geocentric perspective.
A society runs on trust like an engine runs on oil. You let it run dry and the whole thing grinds to a stop. So a lonely society? That's a society with no trust left. People who don't connect don't trust each other, or the news, or the institutions, or the guy across the aisle who voted different. And here's the scary part. A country with no trust is super easy to push around. And I need you to really hear this next part. If someone wanted to tear us apart, fracturing trust is the weapon of choice. So it wouldn't be an accident or a side effect, it's the whole point. And it's completely invisible. Now think about it. You want to take down a rival country without firing a shot? You don't go after the army, you go after the glue. You crank up every argument, you reward every meltdown, and you make every single person feel alone and surrounded and suspicious of the guy next door. A country where nobody trusts anybody can't recognize, it can't push back, it can't even agree on what's real anymore. It's already beaten, it just hasn't gotten the news yet. And the genius of it, the truly evil genius, is that it doesn't look like an attack. It looks like culture. It looks like us, just being angry and lonely and online, which means most people will go their whole lives and never once clock it as an operation. The best weapon there is? It's the one your target thinks is just their own bad mood. So look, here's what you're actually dealing with. Loneliness isn't some private little sadness you deal with on a Sunday. It's your defenses going down. It's the thing that wrecks your ability to think clearly, read people right, and smell a con coming. And spread out across a whole country, it's a wide open door that the bad guys don't even have to build. They just have to walk right through it. Which means the fix isn't soft. It's not bubble baths and deep breaths. Every real connection you've got is a wall that holds. Every friendship you keep, every person you check in on, that's powerful infrastructure. That's the stuff they can't crack. The people who want to steer you are betting you'll stay locked up, suspicious, and alone, because that's the version of you they can move around the board. So don't be that person. Don't give them the target. Picking up the phone to call someone you care about is a lifeline for both of you.
And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with the beasts of the earth. Book of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 8. There have been many related sequential coincidences all throughout my life. Incidents that by themselves would have led nowhere. Statistically, the odds against the same are a related sequence of events happening to one individual are astronomically high. It is this series of incidents that have convinced me that God has had a hand in my life. I do not believe in fate. I do not believe in accidents. I cannot,
and will not accept the theory that long sequences of unrelated accidents determine world events. It is inconceivable that those with power and wealth would not band together with a common bond, a common interest, and a long-range plan to decide and direct the future of the world. For those with the resources to do otherwise would be totally irresponsible. I know that I would be the first to organize a conspiracy to control the outcome of the future if I were such a person and a conspiracy did not yet exist. I would do it in an attempt to ensure the survival of the principles in which I believe, the survival of my family, my survival, and the survival of the human race, if for no other reason. I believe, therefore, that a grand game of chess is being played on a level that we can barely imagine, and we are the pawns. Pawns are valuable only under certain circumstances, and are frequently sacrificed to gain an advantage. Anyone who has studied military strategy is familiar with the concept of sacrifice. Those who have seriously studied history have probably discovered the real reason we go to war on a regularly scheduled basis. My research has shown, at this point, that the future laid out for us may be just about impossible to change. I do not agree with the means by which the powerful few have chosen for us to reach the end. I do not agree that the end is where we should end at all. But unless we can wake the people from their sleep, nothing short of civil war will stop the planned outcome. I base that statement not on defeatism, but on the apathy of the majority of the American people. 25 years ago, I would have believed otherwise, but 25 years ago, I was also sound asleep. We have been taught lies. Reality is not at all what we perceive it to be. We cannot survive any longer by hanging on to the falsehoods of the past. Reality must be discerned at all costs if we are to be a part of the future. Truth must prevail in all instances, no matter who it hurts or helps, if we are to continue to live upon this earth. At this point, what we want may no longer matter. It is what we must do to ensure our survival that counts. The old way is in the certain process of destruction, and a new world order is beating down the door. I fear for the little ones, the innocents, who are already paying for our mistakes. There exists a great army of occupationally orphaned children. They are attending government-controlled daycare centers. There are latchkey kids who are running wild in the streets, and the lopsided, emotionally wounded children of single welfare mothers, born only for the sake of more money in the monthly check. Open your eyes and look at them, for they are the future. In them I see the sure and certain destruction of this once proud nation. In their vacant eyes, I see the death of freedom. They carry with them a great emptiness, and someone will surely pay a great price for their suffering. If we do not act in concert with each other and ensure that the future becomes what we need it to be, then we will surely deserve whatever fate awaits us. I believe with all my heart that God put me in places and in positions throughout my life so that I would be able to deliver this warning to His people. I pray that I have been worthy and that I have done my job.
So in this video, I will explain most of the aspects of mind control being used against us with all of the proof that you could ever need. Every segment of this video is important to watch. If you're planning on watching this video for 5 minutes, you should probably just come back to it later. And if for whatever reason you want to skip ahead, there will be timestamps here. But once you learn how to understand mind control, the control that it has over you will fall. I'll say that again. Once you understand mind control, it becomes way less effective.
Comrades, this is Big Brother, and I am always watching.
Truth exists, and what is done cannot be undone. One day, the party will announce that 2 + 2 made 5, and we would all have to believe it.
Say our slogan proudly with me. War is peace. Ignorance is strength. Freedom is slavery.
Freedom is holding on to memory, to truth. Freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 makes 4. From the age of uniformity, from the age of Big Brother, from me, Winston Smith. Greetings from 1984.
If you were being invaded by Russians who were playing on loudspeakers that they are coming to rape and kill the people of your house and town, and were walking around on the streets doing just that, you would do whatever it takes to save your family and as many people as you can. But let's say your parents had been fed so much propaganda that they refused to look out the window and say the gunshots are just fireworks, and they say the loudspeakers are just pranksters, and your family refuses to get up from the TV. Would you go lay down and let the slaughter come? Or would you get up and start doing whatever it takes to save as many people as you can? I think the gut feeling would be so bad that no matter the horrors out there, it would 100% be worth the risk to escape. But that gut feeling is gone. And now you know why. Would you wake up, grab a gun, your children, your family, your car, and attempt to save them all? Or would you tell them to give into the TV, the propaganda, because standing up and facing what's coming is just too hard for you?
Tweet, why is all this blatant Epstein stuff not the front page of every newspaper right now? Why do I feel like I'm indulging in an unfounded conspiracy theory when I mention docs literally published by the DHS? Why do I feel like a bystander on the street wouldn't have even heard about it? We've got evidence of a billionaire pedophile cabal. Why do I feel like some people are just like, oh well, business as usual? Why? And I saw that tweet and I was like, oh, tap me in. I think I can help answer. Just a little bit. Alright, to answer this, let me start with a question. When you think about the world, the wider world, news, injustices, various issues that we all must tackle as a globe, do you ever find yourself wondering if it's all bullshit? How often do you approach media with suspicion? Is this paid for? Is this AI? Is this manufactured outrage? Is it propaganda? A distraction? A total fabrication? Basically, do you ever find yourself doubting your ability to know anything? So when it comes to our epistemological bases, what we know, how we know stuff, a little bit of doubt is healthy. It's pretty good, actually. Questioning your own beliefs gets you to throw out some bad ones that no longer serve you. It gets you to ask constantly, what evidence would change my mind, and get better ideas. And through this process, you find yourself with a better worldview. But what happens when there is too much doubt? When people experience too much doubt, when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to knowing stuff, they usually don't participate. Common reactions include cynicism, like just deciding that the truth is inherently unknowable, tapping out completely, being like, oh man, I just can't, and silence and compliance, just not knowing enough to know if you should be angry, or if your dissent would even help. Cynical, uninformed, and silent. This is like the basis for a passive, obedient citizenry. And turns out there is a propaganda technique that gets you all of these things. It's called flooding the zone.
Your study of propaganda is important not only to you, but to me and to the world.
Welcome to Propaganda Academy.
There is a propaganda technique called flooding the zone. Sometimes it's called the fire hose of falsehood. It's also sometimes called gish galloping or spreading, but here's how it works. Let's say you're a power-hungry politician. All you want is money, power, status, and I don't know, to be feared or whatever. You are like a balloon, a helium balloon, just set to rise in the current system that we have. But you've also done some really, really, really shady stuff in your past, and if that stuff ever came out, you could find your entire life over, ruined. Yes, you are this rising helium balloon in politics, but you're vulnerable to just a tiny pin. The tiny pin of truth wielded by the journalist who can just pop you and your downfall begins. Using the truth to topple power is a pretty common historical pattern. It tends to excite a populace and make people revolt. 3 examples off the top of my head. You got Martin Luther nailing his criticisms of the church onto its door, more or less starting a gigantic religious schism with the truth. Richard Nixon's unraveling came with Watergate, which was journalists, and Harvey Weinstein, who, to be clear, did it to himself. But the injustices of Harvey Weinstein were only met with actual consequences once people found out. The Me Too movement, basically. So these are all moments when the tiny pin of truth pops the gigantic helium balloon of power. Now, if you have done something pretty bad, with regards to the Epstein files, it might be child rape, for example, something really, really horrible that just like invokes this primal disgust in so many people, you'd do anything not to have that come out. You'd basically be buyable and threatenable at all times.
Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer extortion. The X makes it sound cool.
So in the case of Donald Trump, it'd be something like the rape case against Katie Johnson when she was 13, that she accused Donald Trump of raping her, which, by the way, was public knowledge before any of these releases came out. Just so we're clear. But you would know that there are certain pins that could take you down. Maybe it's a confirmed case, maybe it's a video, maybe it's a murder, whatever it happens to be. Now, one way to insulate yourself from this pin is to remove it. Anyone who dares to use the truth against you, you threaten them. Sometimes this takes the form of extreme censorship, and by that I mean literally killing journalists, witnesses, and whistleblowers. Other times it's bribes, other times it's soft power, like discrediting them before they can even get to the microphone, digging up something from their past and just exaggerating it, making sure that that is the first impression that people have of them in the media. But there is a structural problem with these strategies, and that is the needle is still there. The truth is still there. You are always vulnerable as this rising wannabe Führer. You can still be brought down by the truth. So you come up with another strategy. Instead of getting rid of the needle, you add a haystack. You bury it. You bury it in so much pointless bullshit, just information that nobody needs, some of it good, some of it bad. And this is a specific design, and you just dump it on. You pile it on in order to hide the truth as much as possible. Nobody is going to sift through that, and even if they do sift through that, most people, when they hear it, are just going to assume it's just more bullshit. They're like, man, there's just so much noise out there. Why is this one true? Why is anything true?
He said the Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media. And the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with, you see there.
This technique, as I mentioned before, is called flooding the zone. Instead of focusing on what you want the message to be, you target the recipients of all messages. You make them doubt anything that has any kind of basis in reality. Things like independent and investigative journalism, things like science, you drown out their noise by creating more noise. And if nobody's getting clear signals, if nobody's agreeing on what reality is, there's no trust. Why do this? Because to some people, trust is a threat.
If I'm trying to predict what Donald Trump is going to do and where he's going to go, I mean, like one rule is look for where there's trust in the world and he will try to destroy it. He's really uncomfortable with trust. And I think there's a logic to it. And the logic to it is he himself is so untrustworthy. And I don't mean that as an insult, it's just true. He lies all the time. He stiffs people on deals, all that. That's the way he thinks you move through the world. Yeah. If we're in a world where we trust each other, he's at a disadvantage. He doesn't belong. But if he eliminates trust between people, he gets the world into a place where he's good at it. None of us trust each other.
It's kind of evil, and it also has some really interesting ties to what it makes the general population do. When people are overwhelmed by too much information, when signals of fact and fiction and opinions and alleged statistics all hit one person, they do tap out. A typical response would be disorientation, cynicism, deciding that the truth is just inherently impossible to know. You raise the psychic costs for anybody speaking out because now they don't know if they are parroting misinformation or if they are actually even attacking the right thing, which produces a culture of silence. Your media landscape becomes one not of truth but of uncertainty, which is pretty prime ground for manipulation, and you create a longing for a simpler time, sort of a lure towards conservatism. But that's not all. You also create a big, beautiful blank slate. You now have the ultimate power to come in and, if you are quite certain, to give people your narrative, your very certain narrative, people who are desperate just to hear somebody who knows what they're talking about. Essentially, you have people out there who are craving a new way to understand the crazy world around them. They are yearning for a narrative. And if you come in with just absolute certainty, like the original definition of con man, the confidence man, if you stand up and unabashedly say, this is what is good, this is what is bad, a lot of people are going to use you as their new yardstick of truth. You essentially capitalize on their fear, on their confusion, and become the new word of God.
Propaganda is to democracy what violence is to a dictatorship.
There's a really interesting paper on this that I recently read that highlights this propaganda technique, flooding the zone, as a key component to a fascist autocracy. That's crazy, right? I mean, you take the most famous fascist autocracy that people know, we'll go Godwin's Law, we'll bring up the Nazis, and the exact same technique can be seen with Goebbels. He saw the mass uncertainty as the ultimate opportunity. Hannah Arendt, I have a lovely little quote from her. In an ever-changing, incomprehensible world, the masses had reached a point where they would, at the same time, believe everything and nothing, think that everything was possible and nothing was true. The totalitarian mass leaders based their propaganda on the correct psychological assumption that, under such conditions, one could make people believe the most fantastic statements one day and trust that if the next day they were given irrefutable proof of their falsehood, they would take refuge in cynicism. Instead of deserting their leaders who had lied to them, they would protest that they had known all along that the statement was a lie, and would admire the leaders for their superior tactical cleverness. Basically justifying being lied to as 4D chess, baby.
Trump's 3D chess move.
He's actually playing 4D chess.
President Trump's 5D chess.
Drives you mad, doesn't it?
The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, and the distinction between true and false, no longer exist.
And that is flooding the zone on what it does. It's crazy, right? There are so many more propaganda techniques at play, but when it comes to answering that original tweet, why does it feel like nothing's happening, that nobody cares, or like the truth just isn't working or getting through? There's one more propaganda technique I want to cover. Poisoning the well. The easiest way to explain poisoning the well is, let's say you and I were about to sit down and watch a movie. You know, we're chilling, we're on the couch. We go to watch it, but just before it starts, I turn to you and I say, oh man, I was reading the reviews for this. Apparently this is the worst movie of the year. I don't know if you've seen like all the hate it's getting online, but it's crazy. It's got like a 1-star average, I think less than. Apparently nobody can act, like the dialogue's all weird and stuff. Anyway, let's watch. It doesn't matter how good the movie is, or even how true anything I've said is, you are going to naturally look for its flaws. And this is poisoning the well. Within one sentence, I have taken you from someone who could have enjoyed the movie to someone who is just going to be suspicious of it. Critical, cynical, primed to just not like it. We'll do 3 examples for the Epstein drop, so we'll do people, the document, and then the wider narrative itself, which I think is just one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Poisoning the well when it comes to people usually looks like discrediting. If somebody does something that you don't like or something that could topple your message, you make sure that you get to the media first and say, oh, they got mental health issues, or they've got an arrest, or like a weird tattoo that could be a Nazi tattoo, or a bunch of weird stuff on their laptop. Just like saying, you know this movie sucks, right? You're saying, you know this person's crazy, right? And then they start talking and you just look for their flaws. The most harrowing example is obviously when you see it with victims, where people say, oh, this is a witch hunt, it's a hoax, they're just doing it for money or attention, you know, that kind of stuff. And when it is a person that you're discrediting, it's pretty straightforward. But it doesn't have to be a person. And here's our second example, poisoning the well when it comes to the document drop. In our example where you are the billionaire pedophile, and you want to make sure that nobody believes the evidence, it's in your best interest to put out a bunch of fake evidence. Ideally, fake evidence that is way more ludicrous than what you've actually done. A fake document that says that you've eaten 10 babies' brains, something like that. I don't know, some crazy stuff. I imagine we'll see a bunch of this. But essentially this achieves two goals. So firstly, it poisons the well of the documents. Your super ludicrous, insane fake document amongst all the real ones, once it's debunked, and it should be debunkable, it serves as a question mark on all the real documents. When something does come out that is also beyond the pale of their morality, what they would ever do or what they could even conceive people of doing, they'll also say, well, I mean, that last one was fake. Who's to say this one's real? But then it does something else. Anchoring and normalization. Oh my God. So it anchors people to a crime that is far, far more disgusting than what you've actually done, even though what you've actually done is incredibly disgusting. But by making people think of this first, it defangs the crime. It's like that old saying, if you want a kitten, ask for a horse. Well, if you've killed a kitten, tell people you've killed a horse. In fact, get people to discuss killing horses so much that it becomes normalized in society. Which is where we get to our third example of poisoning the well, and this is one of the most diabolical things that I think I've ever seen in my life. Alright.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question. Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
We now have evidence to suggest something that I've been saying for years, and that is that the culture war was a manufactured psyop. There's evidence to say it's not, of course, but the case for psyop looks like this. In October 2011, Jeffrey Epstein met with 4chan founder Christopher Poole. Moo. 4 days after Epstein met with Moo, the guy who introduced the pair, Boris Nikolic, an advisor to Bill Gates, emailed Epstein. This article describes why I find Moot interesting. The potential for manipulation is huge. The article was about 4chan's ability to launch cyber attacks, manipulate Google search, and fuel a hive mind mentality. Now, the same month that this all goes down, 4chan launches the forum Poll, which became a cesspit for far-right extremists and eventually brought us Pizzagate and QAnon. But why? Why would people involved in a billionaire pedophile cabal spread rumours about a billionaire pedophile cabal? And the answer is because it is the perfect way to poison the well. It means that the first time that most people ever hear about some billionaire pedophile cabal, they're hearing it from whoever in their network has spent the most time in a tinfoil hat. Probably someone who's terminally online, probably someone who's just a little bit nuts, so they associate the story, the billionaire pedophile cabal, with crazy people. Bruh. And meanwhile, this serves all your other goals. It anchors people to crimes that are just slightly more fantastical than what's actually going on. It normalizes talking about billionaire pedophiles, so when the conversation does inevitably shift to reality, people are used to it. It pre-bunks dissent just freaking virtuosically by conflating all dissent, all truth, all investigative journalism with crazy conspiracy theorists. The conspiracy theory, if you ever looked into that the label conspiracy theorist was created in order to pre-bunk all dissent for all issues. And then fourthly, my word, does it flood the zone. It's the perfect kindling for rumours and conversations. It's all unverified, but all incredibly scandalous. It's a whodunit. It's a mystery. It's a game. And it's tribal. It generates noise upon noise upon noise. Divisive noise. Oh, wow. It's like, I don't know, Steve Bannon is Nero and the world is Rome on fire. I don't know if that actually happened. Feels like it's probably apocryphal. You know, like one of those historical myths where the truth gets exaggerated here and fictionalized there. Which, I mean, given the subject matter, would actually be extremely appropriate. To compare the Epstein class to Nero, fiddling while the world burns, it's kind of fitting that we find ourselves once again doubting reality. But I'm not sure if it matters. Because the thing that keeps the image of Nero alive in our cultural memory isn't truth. The reason the myth has stuck around is because we all recognize its meaning. A morally bankrupt ruling class, putting even their most frivolous desires so far ahead of the life or death needs of everybody else. And not only are these tyrants well aware of the plight of the people they exploit and burn, they delight in it. I looked it up, by the way. The story of Nero, it's not real. It never happened. There weren't even fiddles yet. But while the story isn't real, the symbolism is as real as it gets. The Epstein class want you to give up on the truth as a concept, to not believe your lying eyes, to give up on trusting other people, and above all, to give up on trusting yourself. And a lot of people have. And if you're in that place right now, I get it. I really do. I am no stranger to it. The propaganda is insanely effective. So I'd like to end on a message for everybody who is feeling hopeless right now. When you are feeling particularly cynical, saturated in that propaganda, like you'll never know what's real and what's fake, there is still one irrefutable truth that even our most cynical selves can believe. That these wealthy creeps will always want more. More power, more control, and more money. Just look at how they react to taxes. They don't spend $1 more than they have to. So, if we can all agree on that, then I would like to offer a slightly less bleak logical conclusion. If the situation was truly hopeless, they wouldn't be spending billions of their dollars on propaganda to convince you that it is. So do you come back to that original tweet and answer it? If you want to know why these Epstein documents feel like they are defying reality, it's because the people inside the documents got to reality first.
Thank you for attending Propaganda Academy.
And the big question, is your country using propaganda? Well, let's get past this right now. Yes, of course, absolutely. Your local government is almost certainly using propaganda, and companies operating within your country are definitely using propaganda. They're calling it advertising, but six in one hand, right? In fact, there are so many different organizations using propaganda across the globe that instead of listing all of the different organizations that might be in your country, we'll save some time and we'll give you the tools to tell whether or not something is propaganda. So here are some of the common propaganda techniques. In no particular order. 1, name calling, also known as stereotyping. This would be when you invent a name to call someone to help dismiss their credibility. Tree hugger, Republican, Democrat, conspiracy theorist. 2, and this is a pet peeve of mine, as you know very well, Matt, and I'm sorry that you have to hear all the rants about this, the virtue words, the glittering generalities. Oh, values. What about our values, our morals, things like that? And heart, right? Not the worst of Captain Planet crew, but I mean, when people say, oh, we've put a little heart into our values, next thing you know, boom, there's another war. Number 3, the good old testimonial. When you want to get people on board with something that you're doing and you don't want them looking at the facts too closely, why not have an authoritative person just say that they also like it? You know, it doesn't have to just be Morgan Freeman. It could also be the Dalai Lama, or if you could get the Pope, though I imagine that's kind of difficult. These testimonials make people more attracted just to the idea of the person presenting the information rather than the information itself. 4, transfer. Now, if testimonials are depending upon the credibility of a person, then transfer depends upon the credibility or the unlikability of an institution. This is a guilt by association thing or a street cred by association thing. You know, you see a statement that sounds kind of weird. I'll just make one up. Eating hay bales turns out to be good for your heart. And this statement was found by a study conducted through the Northeastern Regional Farmers and Doctors Association. Be very careful when you hear an unfamiliar group authoritatively condoning something. 5, the bandwagon. hey, everybody else is doing it, right? So why can't we? Or, hey, all the smart people are doing this, and you better get in now, buddy, before time runs out. And 6, and I love this one, the name of it at least, plain folks. You know, just plain old-fashioned folks putting food on the family dinner table and just trying to make our way and be a good, conscientious citizen and just do the right thing. It's just the right thing to do. The idea here is that you will be suckered in by the argument that the common man unanimously understands this. Another phrase like, you know, it's just common sense. Why don't the guys in Washington get that? Elect me. Now, these are just a few of the propaganda techniques that are commonly used in countries and by companies across the world. So the next time you hear an extraordinary or contentious claim presented as an inarguable fact, then make sure you play these techniques back in your head and ask yourself, who's really telling me this and why? Oh, and one more before we leave. You longtime listeners are probably going, hey, why is he dressed like a doctor? Matt and Ben and Agent Scully are certainly not doctors. That's true. But if you did not know us and you just happened to be in a waiting room somewhere and you saw a guy in a white jacket like this on screen talking to you about, say, I don't know, a new health risk or maybe global climate change or an endangered animal or something like that, you'd be more likely to believe them. Whether or not they're a doctor, I mean, this is just a jacket. But enough about those propaganda techniques.
Every news host you've ever seen on every news channel is a sworn agent of deception. Okay? And the reason this works is because everyone is staring at screens instead of doing literally anything else. Right? So they're able to just spew out lies because everyone is just outsourcing their thought to an algorithm. Okay, so we're going to go over some of the deception techniques that are used by these news anchors. Panic mongering. This goes one step beyond simple fear mongering. With panic mongering, there is never a break from the fear. The idea is to terrify and terrorize the audience during every waking moment. From Muslims to swine flu to recession to homosexuals to immigrants to the rapture itself, the belief over at Fox seems to be that if your fight or flight reflexes aren't activated, you aren't alive. This, of course, raises the question, why would you terrorize your own audience? Because it's the fastest way to bypass the rational brain. In other words, when people are afraid, they don't think rationally, and when they can't think rationally, they'll believe anything. Character assassination / ad hominem. Fox does not like to waste time debating the idea. Instead, they prefer a quicker route to dispensing with their opponents. Go after the person's credibility, motives, intelligence, character, or if even necessary, sanity. No category of character assassination is off the table, and no offense is beneath them. Fox and like-minded media figures also use ad hominem attacks, not just against individuals, but entire categories of people in an effort to discredit the ideas of every person who is seen to fall into that category. Example, liberals, hippies, progressives, conspiracy theorists, etc. This form of argument, if it can be called that, leaves no room for genuine debate over ideas. So by definition, it is undemocratic, not to mention just plain crass. Projection / flipping. This one is frustrating for the viewer who is trying to actually follow the argument. It involves taking whatever underhand tactic you are using and then accusing your opponent of doing it to you first. We see this frequently in the immigration discussion where anti-racists are accused of racism, or in the climate change debate where those who argue for the human causes of the phenomenon are accused of not having science or facts on their side. It is often called upon when the media host finds themselves on the ropes in the debate. Rewriting history? This is another way of saying that propagandists make the facts fit their worldview. The Downing Street memos on the Iraq War were a classic example of this on a massive scale, but it happens daily and over smaller issues as well. A recent case in point is Palin's managing of the Paul Revere ride, which Fox reporters have bent over backwards to validate. Why lie about the historical facts, even when they can be demonstrated to be false? Well, because dogmatic minds actually find it easier to reject reality than update their viewpoints. They will literally rewrite history if it serves their interests. And they will often speak with such authority that the casual viewer will be tempted to question what they knew as a fact. Scapegoating and othering. This works best when people feel insecure or scared. It's technically a form of both fear-mongering and diversion, but it's so persuasive that it deserves its own category. The simple idea is that you can find a group to blame for social or economic problems. You can then go on to A, justify violence/dehumanization of them, and B, subvert responsibility for any harm that may befall them as a result. Conflating violence with power and opposition to violence with weakness. This is more of what I'd call a meta frame, a deeply held belief, than a media technique, but it's manifested in the ways news is reported constantly. For example, terms like show of strength are often used to describe acts of repression, such as those by the Iranian regime against the protesters in the summer of 2009. There are several concerning consequences of this form of conflation. First, it has the potential to make people feel falsely emboldened by the show of force. It can turn wars into sporting events. Secondly, especially in the context of American politics, displays of violence, whether manifested in war or debates about the Second Amendment, are seen as noble and, in especially surreal irony, moral. Violence becomes synonymous with power, patriotism, and piety. Bullying. This is a favorite technique of several Fox commentators. That it continues to be employed demonstrates that it seems to have some efficiency. Bullying and yelling works best on people who come to the conversation with a lack of confidence, either in themselves or their grasp of the subject being discussed. The bully exploits the lack of confidence by berating the guest into submission or compliance. Often, less self-possessed people will feel shame and anxiety when being berated, and the quickest way to end the intimidate discomfort is to cede authority to the bully. The bully is then able to interpret that as a win. Confusion. As with the preceding technique, this one works best on an audience that is less confident and self-possessed. The idea is to deliberately confuse the argument, but insist that the logic is airtight and imply that anyone who disagrees is either too dumb or too fanatical to follow along. Less independent minds will interpret the confusion technique as a form of sophisticated thinking. thereby giving the user's claim veracity in the viewer's mind. Populism. This is especially popular in election years. The speaker identifies themselves as one of the people and the target of their ire as an enemy of the people. Their opponent is always elitist or bureaucrat or a government insider or some other category that is not the people. The idea is to make the opponent harder to relate to and harder to empathize with. It often goes hand in hand with scapegoating, a common logical fallacy with populism bias. When used by the right, it is accused that elitists are almost always liberals, a category of political actors who, by definition, advocate for non-elite groups. Invoking the Christian God, this is similar to othering and populism. With morality politics, the idea is to declare yourself and your allies as patriots, Christians, and real Americans. Those are inseparable categories in this line of thinking, and anyone who challenges them as not. Basically, God loves Fox and Republicans and America and hates taxes and anyone who doesn't love those other three things, because the speaker has been benedicted by God to speak on behalf of all Americans. Any challenge is perceived as immoral. It is a cheap and easy technique used by all totalitarian entities, from states to cults. Saturation. There are three components to effective saturation: being repetitive, being ubiquitous, and being consistent. The message must be repeated over and over. It must be everywhere, and it must be shared across commentators. Example: Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. Veracity and hard data have no relationship to the efficiency of saturation. There is a psychological effect of being exposed to the same message over and over, regardless of whether it's true or if it even makes sense. Example: Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. If something is said enough times by enough people, many people will come to accept it as truth. Another example is Fox's own slogan of fair and balanced. Disparaging education. There is an emerging and disturbing lack of reverence for education and intellectualism in many mainstream media discourses. In fact, some circles, example Fox, higher education is often disparaged as elitist. Having a university credential is perceived by these folks as not a sign of credibility, but a lack of it. In fact, among some commentators, evidence of intellectual prowess is treated snidely as anti-American. Education and other evidence of being trained in critical thinking are direct threats to a hive mind mentality, which is why they are so viscerally demeaned. Guilt by association. This is a favorite of Glenn Beck and Andrew Breitbart, both of whom have used it to decimate the careers and lives of many good people. Here's how it works. If your cousin's college roommate's uncle's ex-wife attended a dinner party back in 1984 with Gorbachev niece's ex-boyfriend's sister, then you, by extension, are a communist set on destroying America. Period. Diversion. This is where, when on the ropes, the media commentator suddenly takes the debate in a weird but predictable direction to avoid accountability. This is the point in the discussion where most Fox anchors start comparing the opponent to Saul Alinsky or invoking Acorn or Media Matters in a desperate attempt to win through guilt by association. Or they will talk about wanting to focus on moving forward, as though by analyzing the current state of things or how we got to this state of things, you have no regard for the future. Any attempt to bring the discussion back to the issue at hand will likely be called deflection or an ironic use of the technique projection/flipping. In debating some of these tactics with colleagues and friends, I have also noticed that the Fox viewership seems to be marked by a sort of collective personality disorder, whereby the viewer feels almost as though they've been let into a secret society. Something about their affiliation with the network makes them feel privileged, and this affinity is likely what drives the viewers to defend the network so vehemently. They seem to identify with it at a core level, because it tells them they are special and privy to something the rest of us don't have. It's akin to the loyalty one feels by being let into a private club or a gang. That effect is also likely to make the propaganda more powerful because it goes mostly unquestioned.
From the 1950s all the way up to the 1990s, there was only a few channels through which information flowed. 3 major television networks, a handful of national newspapers, most owned by the same few companies, radio stations owned by the same media conglomerates, each curated by gatekeepers in music, radio, and film. Hollywood itself was always invitation only, a closed world run by its own priesthood of power brokers, image makers, witches, and black magicians. Universities pushed safe ideas. It was a trickle-down effect from the top of the all-seeing eye of the pyramid. Publishing houses controlled what counted as legitimate knowledge. The winners always write the history books. Public schools had more in common with the prison system than true learning centers. Bells, uniforms, rows, schedules, slot mails, standardized testing, but they served their purpose. State-sponsored mind control centers. Each generation was molded with similar beliefs, similar myths, similar assumptions about how the world worked. After World War II, the post-war order provided the grounding myths of the modern West. The Allied victory became the moral backbone of the 20th century. It made Americans proud to be Americans, liberators, patriots, the righteous victors of history. And within that curated narrative, the ultimate historical evil was established. Nazi Germany as the ultimate boogeyman and the horrors of the Holocaust. This became the defining moral boundary of modern Western culture, the archetype of absolute evil that anchored the entire post-war worldview. This wasn't merely history, it became a defining mythos, a moral axis around which political discourse, cultural identity, and historical interpretation would revolve for generations, a reminder of what true evil supposedly looked like, even as forms of corruption and power already existed much closer to home. Welcome to Hidden America, where magic meets cybernetics and the code behind reality reveals itself. Act 1. The birth of monoculture. Everyone watched the same shows. Everyone heard the same news. Everyone learned the same history. Everyone listened to the same songs. This was monoculture. If you want to understand reality, you were expected to obtain your worldview from these institutions. The path was already laid out for you, and you weren't expected to veer off it. In truth, there weren't many ways to anyway. This system produced what people call consensus reality. a shared framework that determined which ideas were considered sane and which were dismissed as fringe. The Overton window was tightly controlled. Inside this structure, there was almost no room for the schizo-mystic mind. The person who suspected the world was more complicated than the official narrative. The one who connected mythology, symbolism, hidden history, and power structures had only two social categories available to them: insane, or the slightly more tolerable label, the whack job, the quack. And there weren't many of them, at least not publicly. The system made sure of that. Silence truly was golden. Subtle programming reinforced the boundaries. The inverse of a good lesson was often used as a weapon, repeated again and again until deviation from consensus felt socially dangerous. But eventually, cracks began to appear in the official story. Contradictions accumulated. But as cracks began to appear in the official story, as contradictions accumulated and consensus reality began to feel less and less like consensus, a few trailblazers started opening doors. They even had to categorize them as something entirely new: conspiracy theorists. The conspiracy theorist was looked down upon and made the butt of the joke, but many were persistent. As new forms of media began to emerge, independent voices slipped through the cracks. A handful of researchers, writers, and broadcasters began pulling back the curtain. They opened the doors to what felt like the inner sanctum of hidden gnosis, the place so many of us now reside. And then something happened that changed everything. Monoculture collapsed. From that moment forward, the boundary between truth and nonsense could no longer be centrally managed. But what replaced monoculture was something far stranger. The broadcast era, roughly 1945 to 2005, had relied on centralized control of information, but that control was broken through two major events even before 2005, 9/11, and more importantly, the introduction of the internet. Act 2, 9/11, and the birth of the first decentralized mystery school. But monoculture didn't collapse all at once. The first crack came in the form of a single event that every person alive at the time remembers exactly where they were when it happened. It was our JFK moment, September 11th, 2001. For the first time in the broadcast era, a global event unfolded in real time on live television across every network simultaneously. Planes, fire, collapsing towers, smoke pouring into the skyline of New York. For days, every television channel repeated the same horrific images on an endless loop. We didn't realize it, but it was the largest simultaneous act of trauma-based mind control released on a mass scale. A feeling of fear was synchronized into every bit of media regarding 9/11. But this also lit a spark that continues to burn until today. Some of the early conspiracy theorists were vindicated, and at first, the monoculture machine functioned exactly as it always had. The narrative appeared immediately. Who did it, why it happened, what it meant, who the enemy was. It was all decided almost overnight. But something different happened this time. People started asking questions. Not millions at first, but enough. A generation of future schizos were born, gestating enough to form the first real digital counterculture of the fledgling internet age. By 2001, the internet already existed, but it was still young, forums, message boards, early websites, scattered communities of researchers, and for the first time in the broadcast era, people had a tool that allowed them to compare information outside the official channels. Video clips were shared, documents were analyzed, timelines were archived, contradictions were debated. Instead of one centralized narrative flowing from the top of the pyramid, thousands of competing interpretations began circulating at the same time. The monoculture machine was suddenly facing something it had never encountered before: decentralized scrutiny. The internet had created a new kind of citizen, not just a viewer, a researcher. And once people realized they could independently analyze information, something irreversible happened. Trust in the legacy media began to fracture. Slowly at first, then faster. But by the mid-2000s and late 2010s, the floodgates were open. The internet was expanding rapidly. Forums multiplied, blogs appeared everywhere. Podcasts were born, entire archives of books, documents, and forgotten media were suddenly accessible. Information was no longer scarce. We entered the age of information and disinformation. It was overwhelming, information overload, and that environment produced a new type of mind, the kind of mind that thrives in chaos. Chaos always breeds a new order. A mind that doesn't trust the system. A mind that questions the official narrative. The pattern recognizer. The obsessive researcher. The symbol decoder. The one willing to spend hours, days, sometimes years following threads through the digital labyrinth. This was the birth of the schizo-mystic synchronist class. People who were no longer satisfied receiving reality from institutions. People who wanted to understand the machinery behind the curtain. The internet didn't just distribute information. It created the largest self-initiatory, decentralized mystery school in human history. No official priesthood, no central authority, only a digital labyrinth of data waiting for those willing to enter. The ancients left clues, the language of symbolism, the green language, the language of the birds. Know thyself. And once someone stepped into that digital labyrinth, there was rarely any going back, because monoculture was dead and the age of the digital mysticism had begun. Act 3, the digital labyrinth. People often describe the internet as the shadow of humanity, a dumping ground for society's darkest impulses, conspiracy theories, extremism, pornography, chaos, unfiltered emotion, every taboo idea that polite society prefers to pretend does not exist. But that explanation only scratches the surface. The internet is not simply the shadow, it is something far older in structure. It is a labyrinth. For thousands of years, knowledge was guarded by initiatory traditions, mystery schools, secret societies, esoteric orders, the Eleusinian mysteries, hermetic circles, Gnostic sects, later Masonic lodges and occult fraternities. These systems operated on a very specific architecture. Knowledge was layered. Outer teachings were public. Inner teachings were hidden, esoteric and exoteric. To move deeper, the initiate had to seek. They had to study. They had to decode symbols, myths, texts, and rituals. Knowledge was not handed to them. It had to be earned through exploration. The process itself transformed the student. The internet recreated the structure almost accidentally. At the surface level, the internet is shallow. entertainment feeds, news headlines, viral clips, endless doom scrolling, digital bread and circuses. But beneath that surface layer lies something else entirely. Ancient texts, declassified documents, occult literature, philosophical manuscripts, academic archives, historical footage, thousands of rabbit holes branching in every direction. But none of it is organized for you. There is no set curriculum, no teacher guiding the path for you. You must search. You must use your own lantern, your own light. You must compare sources. You must follow threads from one idea to the next. Most people never leave the surface layer. They stay asleep their entire life. But some people are endowed with that philosophical spark. They fall down rabbit holes, and some never get out. They discover obscure authors. These are the real celebrities, the real heroes, those who wrote down their version of history, the true knowledge of the land. They begin connecting patterns between mythology, history, geopolitics, symbolism, and media. To outsiders, this behavior looks obsessive, but structurally it resembles something ancient, an initiation ritual. Each discovery opens another door. Each connection reveals another layer. Eventually, you begin seeing patterns everywhere, symbols repeated across culture, mythological archetypes embedded in modern media. The deeper someone travels through this labyrinth, the harder it becomes to return to the worldview they once had. Once those patterns become visible, they can't be unseen. And this is what the internet truly changed. For thousands of years, access to deeper knowledge required entry into exclusive institutions, temples, lodges, secret societies. But the internet dissolved those barriers. And now the labyrinth exists in plain sight. Anyone can enter. Anyone can wander its corridors. But only a small percentage of people choose to go deep enough to understand what they're looking at. And these are the people who began forming a new cultural archetype: the schizo, the mystic, the digital occultist, the pattern recognizer, the obsessive researcher, the digital hermit sitting in a dimly lit room at 3 a.m. with 20 browser tabs open, connecting threads between ideas that most people would never think to compare. To the outside world, they look strange, but historically, every mystic, philosopher, and initiate looks strange to the society around them. These are the new digital philosophers. The difference now is at scale, because the internet created the largest initiatory landscape humanity has ever seen. And in the ruins of monoculture, a new social paradigm began to emerge. 3 archetypes shaped by the information age: the normies, the schizos, and the psychopaths. The normies remained inside consensus reality. They consume narratives, trust institutions, and rarely wander far from the surface of the labyrinth. The psychopath studies the system itself. They seek power inside the machinery of influence, media, finance, politics, algorithms. They learn how to manipulate perception. But the schizos are something different entirely. They're the explorers of the labyrinth, the pattern recognizers, the symbol readers, the obsessive researchers connecting threads between mythology, history, technology, and power. In older language, this division might have been described differently: the initiated and the profane, those who are awake and those who are asleep. For the schizo, The collapse of the old information pyramid was not chaos, it was liberation. Because for the first time in human history, the path to hidden knowledge no longer required permission from temples, institutions, or gatekeepers. The archive was open, the symbols were visible, the labyrinth was accessible. You simply had to log on and begin the search. Act 4, Digital Occultism and the Rise of Mimetic Magic. But every initiatory tradition has something else that binds it together, a language. And in the digital age, that language became memetics. To normies, memes are just jokes, images, captions, disposable internet humor. But to the schizo, memes are something much deeper. They are symbols, weaponized thoughts, compressed ideas, cultural transmissions. They are fragments of philosophy, politics, mythology, and cultural insights encoded into images that spread faster than traditional language ever could. In older traditions, initiates spoke through symbolic speech. The green language, the language of the birds, meaning hidden in plain sight. Memetics function the same way. Irony becomes camouflage. Humor becomes encryption. Symbols become the sigils of the digital age. A single meme can carry an entire worldview. Ideas replicate through the network of minds the way myths once spread through oral tradition. And this is why memetics became the natural tool of the schizo class. Because schizos do not simply consume information. They decode it, they remix it, they mutate it, they weaponize symbolism. Memetics is the new digital occultism, a decentralized symbolic language used to transmit ideas faster than institutions can contain them. And in a world where narratives shape reality, the ones who control the symbols or control the memes control the battlefield. This is why the death of monoculture did more than fragment media. It created a new class of digital initiates, the rise of the schizos, and the first rupture in the psychopath class. Because in a world where information is infinite, the most dangerous person is no longer the one with power, it is the one who can see through the patterns.
The whole point of this segment was to show you that the screen, the glowing light of knowledge, has always been mind control from the start. From the news anchors, to the mind control in the movies, to the algorithm now. Okay? And they're getting people to worship this technology, right? Because when you tell people anything, they go, but bro, look at what my Google article says. The worship of knowledge, science, or technology is Satanism in its purest form, and its god is Lucifer. Its secret symbol is the all-seeing eye in the pyramid. Okay, that's what these people believe. Okay, these people believe that religion is only a tool to control the masses, and that knowledge is their true God, through which man himself will become God. Electromagnetic signals from the cell phone can change your brain waves and behavior. Hospitals and airplanes ban the use of cell phones because their electromagnetic transmissions can interfere with the sensitive electrical devices. Could the brain also fall into that category? Of course. All of our thoughts, sensations, and actions arise from bioelectricity generated by neurons and transmitted through complex neural circuits inside our skull. Electrical signals between neurons generate electrical fields that radiate out of our brain's tissue as electrical waves that can be picked up by electrodes touching a person's scalp. Measurement of such brainwaves in EEGs provides powerful insight into brain function and a valuable diagnostic tool for doctors. Indeed, so fundamental are brainwaves to the internal workings of the mind. They have become the ultimate legal definition, drawing the line between life and death. Brainwaves change with a healthy person's conscious and unconscious mental activity and state of arousal, but scientists can do more with brainwaves than just listen in on the brain at work. They can selectively control brain function by transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. This technique uses powerful pulses of electromagnetic radiation beamed into a person's brain to jam or excite particular brain circuits. Although a cell phone is much less powerful than TMS, the question still remains, could the electrical signals coming from a phone affect certain brainwaves operating in resonance with the cell phone's transmission frequencies? After all, the caller's cerebral cortex is just centimeters away from radiation broadcast from the phone's antenna. Two studies provide some revealing news. The first, led by Rodney Croft of the Brain Science Institute, Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne, Australia, tested whether cell phone transmissions could alter a person's brainwaves. The researchers monitored the brainwaves of 120 healthy men and women while a Nokia 6110 cell phone, one of the most popular cell phones in the world, was strapped to their head. A computer controlled the phone's transmissions in a double-blind experimental design, which meant that neither the test subject nor researchers knew whether the cell phone was transmitting or idle, while EEG data were collected. The data showed that when the cell phone was transmitting, the power of a characteristic brainwave pattern called alpha waves in the person's brain was boosted significantly. The increased alpha wave activity was greatest in brain tissue directly beneath to the cell phone, strengthening the case that the phone was responsible for the observed effect. Alpha waves fluctuate at a rate of 8 to 12 cycles per second, hertz. These brain waves reflect a person's state of arousal and attention. Alpha waves are genuinely regarded as an indicator of reduced mental effort, cortical idling, or mind wandering. But this conventional view is perhaps an oversimplification. Croft, for example, argues that the alpha wave is really regulating the shift of attention between external and internal inputs. Alpha waves increase in power when a person shifts his or her consciousness to the external world to internal thoughts. They are also the key brainwave signatures of sleep. Cell phone insomnia. If cell phone signals boost a person's alpha waves, does this nudge them subliminally into an altered state of consciousness or have any effect at all on the workings of their mind that can be observed in a person's behavior? In the second study, James Horn and colleagues at the Loughborough University Sleep Research Centre in England devised an experiment to test this question. The result was surprising. Not only could the cell phone signals alter a person's behavior during the call, the effects of the disrupted brainwave patterns continued long after the phone was switched off. Horn and his colleagues controlled a Nokia 6310E cell phone, another popular and basic phone, attached to the head of 10 healthy but sleep-deprived men in their sleep research lab. Their sleep had been restricted to 6 hours the previous night. The researchers then monitored the men's brain waves by EEG while the phone was switched on and off by remote computer, and also switched between standby, listen, and talk modes of operation for 30-minute intervals on different nights. The experiment revealed that after the phone was switched to talk mode, a different brain wave pattern called delta waves remained dampened for nearly 1 hour after the phone was shut off. These brainwaves are the most reliable and sensitive marker of stage 2 sleep. Approximately 50% of total sleep consists of this stage. The subjects remained awake twice as long after the phone's transmitting and talk mode was shut off. Although the test subjects had been sleep deprived the night before, they could not fall asleep for nearly 1 hour after the phone had been operating without their knowledge. Although this research shows that cell phone transmissions can affect a person's brain waves with persistent effects on behavior, Horn does not feel there is any need for concern that cell phones are damaging. The arousal effects the researchers measured are equivalent to about half a cup of coffee, and many other factors in a person's surrounding will affect a night's sleep as much more than cell phone transmissions. The significance of this research, he explained, is that although the cell phone power is low, electromagnetic radiation can nevertheless have an effect on mental behavior when transmitting at the proper frequency. He finds that this fact is especially remarkable when considering that everyone is surrounded by electromagnetic clutter radiating from all kinds of electronic devices in our modern world. Cell phones in talk mode seem to be particularly well tuned to frequencies that affect brainwave activity. The results show sensitivity to low-level radiation to a subtle degree. These findings open the door by a crack for more researchers to follow. One only wonders if with different doses, durations, or other devices, would there be greater effects? Croft of Swissburn emphasizes that there are no health worries from these new findings. The exciting thing about this research is that it allows us to have a look at how you might modulate brain function, and this look tells us something about how the brain works on a fundamental level. In other words, the importance of this work is in illuminating the fundamental workings of the brain. Scientists can now splash away with their own self-generated electromagnetic waves and learn a great deal about how brain waves respond and what they do. Right, now the purpose of this segment was to prove to you that phones are mind control on this level, and they have been changing your emotions. And this is just one aspect of it. And now imagine how the algorithm amplifies that, right? Like I've always said, I believe that phones and screens and the internet is the most potent form of mind control, and that the research we just looked at was like from phones, Nokia's, like 20 years ago. And with HARP towers and cell phone towers, which we'll go into in a bit here, it also amplifies the effects. Electromagnetic pulse can be used to disrupt morality in the human brain. This ability to evaluate other people's actions as right or wrong can be disrupted with an electromagnetic pulse to the brain, according to the study conducted by researchers from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. You think of morality as being a really high-level behavior? Lead researcher Dr. Lane Young said, to be able to apply a magnetic field to a specific brain region and change people's moral judgments is really astonishing. Researchers had 20 volunteers listen to several scenarios, then assess the ethics of the people involved. In one experiment, some of the participants received a 25-minute burst of transcranial magnetic stimulation to the nerve cluster known as the right temporal junction. Before hearing the stories, in another experiment, some participants received the TMS burst for only 500 milliseconds after the stories while being asked to make a judgment. A TMS burst induces currents in the brain, causing nerve cells to malfunction. The researchers found that in both cases, a TMS burst to the RTPJ made participants incapable of differentiating between morality and outcome. For example, participants were asked if a man acted ethically in allowing his girlfriend to cross a bridge he knew to be unsafe. When told that she made it safely across, participants whose RTPJ had been interfered with said the man had acted ethically. If she did not make it across, they said he had acted unethically. Previous studies have found that the RTPJ becomes especially active when people think about others' behaviors or thoughts. The new research suggests it plays an important role in moral judgments that involve understanding other people's intentions. What is interesting is that this is the region that is very late developing into adolescence and beyond right into the 20s, said Sarah Jane Blakemore of University College London. The next step would be to look at how or whether moral development changes through childhood into adulthood. So the point of this segment was, of course, to show you another aspect, because once you recognize the own shifts in your mind, once you recognize the mind control taking place, it becomes optional. Okay? Because you can make goals and motives and stick to them. Okay? Yeah, that's the most important thing. Once you recognize the mind control, it becomes optional. Right? And not to mention just, I mean, I have witnessed the destruction of morality happen from when I was a child to now, right? Like, because I used to watch how people would interact, and I used to think about how I would be interacting with them. And, yeah, now people are completely different. Whistleblower is targeted with directed energy attacks and mind control. By Amy Anderson. May 26, 2011. To Dr. A. Lim. I, Amy Lee Anderson, is suffering from directed energy attacks with these symptoms. I fight off mind control technology being used upon me. I am a targeted individual because of being a whistleblower on my former job. I was employed with Intercon Security Systems. They removed me because I had discovered ally spy Jonah Montraga. The CIA had assigned me to him as his human subject with using mind control technology upon me. Intercon Security Systems is a part of this government conspiracy. When I started describing hacking activities were committed upon my place of employment at Department of Health Services, they removed me and refused to investigate. I am fighting for the judge to assist me with this legal issue pertaining to all who are involved with this government mind control technology being used upon me. I have information tracing this ally spy and using mind control devices. Plus, I first discovered his pictured identity over him hacking my cell phone. Once anyone discovers their cell phone is hacked, it is normal for them to investigate. Why would this person do this to my cell phone, and what is their purpose in not wanting to remove themselves out of your life? After being exposed and constantly being told by law enforcement, FBI, Department of Justice, Internal Affairs, Department of Energy, District Attorney, Department of Defense, ACLU, and the local police, NIO student Ishmael, and yourself, Dr. A. Lim, I could not get rid of this demonic man because he is a part of this government conspiracy and using mind control technology upon me. The reason he will not go away is because the law is protecting him with this illegal human experimentation. I am on the government blacklist. They have made me a targeted individual in their mind control program as a whistleblower. I refuse to stop fighting for my life. I suffer from this technology being used upon me every day. My face is always burning when I write about this demonic man or try to seek help in removing him out of my life. He also sends electric shock waves to me that sting my skin. My skin is always having a burning sensation. I and other victims are suffering right under other American citizens' noses while these demons and the government torture and kill us. This demon and other demons within the government are trying to slowly and secretively kill us targeted individuals. We want a march on the White House about mind control technology being used upon us. These weapons are designed to be undetectable devices, yet we are being victims of them. I don't like the fact that the DNA of my body is placed into a remote control device as a cloned blueprint of my mind to be able to reach my brain wave functions by a cell phone tower or satellite connection device technology. Look up microwave hearing or government patent mind control technology. I did not know that I was a victim until I wouldn't stop looking to see what was going on with these psychotronic weapons. Now I know. Help. Allah Doctor's servant. Microwave hearing transmission of specific commands into the subconscious, visual disturbances, visual hallucinations, inject words, numbers into brain via electromagnetic radiation waves, manipulation of emotions, reading thoughts remotely, causing pain to any nerve of the body, remote manipulation of human behavior from space, harassment, stress symptoms such as flying helicopters overhead, seeing, as in a camera, through your eyes to see what you see exactly, control of sleep patterns, computer brain interface, control and communication, complex control of the brain, such as retrieving memories, implanting personalities. To summarize this, there's weapons that do damage to you without leaving long-lasting proof of the damage. Right? Active denial system, directed energy weapon, the heat ray. A lot of this stuff is public around 2000, at least to my knowledge, like 2010 to 2012. But seems like they have this on a mass scale. On a lower scale, I think. But seems through HARP, aerosol, chemtrail clouds, they pretty much can deploy these frequency beams through cell phone towers, your cell phone, other cell phones, and the clouds, and all the chemtrail particles around you. Basically, in conclusion, this weapon is being used on me currently. Throughout the entirety of this video, actually. But I do think that their powers are limited by God. And that they cannot kill me unless God ordains it. But yeah, these weapons have most definitely been being used against me like a lot during the making of this video. But yeah, once you learn to recognize that certain shifts in your brain, your emotions, and like how you feel about doing certain things like changes automatically, you can pretty much just identify the mind control, and all you have to do is identify it and it becomes optional, right? So like every time I go to tell truth, like a lot of bad things will start happening to me, right? Because the algorithm is influencing people to attack you the second you start to escape, and then they start hitting everyone around you with these weapons, so they're more influenced and mad and ignorant to what you say, and they're more hateful towards you. Pretty much, this war is here, whether you like it or not. It just depends on, are you going to lay in the house, listen to the propaganda, ignore the loudspeakers, the shots? Are you just going to let these people slaughter everything you could have built and everything you are? Or are you going to wake up, reclaim your emotions, and be human again? Right? Because I'm telling you, if you wake enough people up, the system will just topple in a good way. The following is an excerpt from the book The Illuminati Formula to Create a Mind Control Slave by Fritz Springmeier. The use of religious fronts. A great deal of monarch programming and slave abuse, as well as the drug trade, is done under three major covers or fronts. Religious fronts, the front of national security, and the military, and the entertainment fields, especially the country western industry, the rock music industry, and Hollywood. These religious fronts were popular for centuries, especially when groups like the Jesuits, the Assassins, and other groups held immense power. Religious fronts are still being used, such as Jay-Z Knight, Elizabeth Clare Prophet's Cult Church, the Church of Scientology, the Charismatic Movement, Jim Jones and Jonestown, and David Korsh's group, etc. Billy Ray Moore's Lord Chapel is entirely a mind control operation. There is a non-denomination Pentecostal church in southern Washington whose entire membership is Satanists under mind control. Various overseas missionary groups are covers for the CIA and mind control. It would take a book to explain how these religious fronts are part of the total trauma-based mind control and how they operate to protect mind control. However, there are some publications which go into some of the CIA connections to these groups. It is suggested that interested persons read these publications. Some of the depictions, such as the lone assassin idea, have been used for centuries as a cover for assassinations planned by the occult hierarchy. If we are going to really reveal how the monarch mind control is done, we will have to explain how the deception is done. If one describes a chameleon only by saying it looks like a lizard, without mentioning the camouflage, then the most important part has been overlooked. Religious fronts are an important part of the Illuminati program for making slaves. In fact, due to their Gnostic philosophy of balancing their good deeds with their bad deeds, it's almost essential to have a religious front through which one can do good deeds. Even though adding this section to the book will spur some to blindly lash out at the book, still, the whole story needs to come out. When we, the authors of this book, write that the monarch type total mind control threatens everything this nation stands for, we are not exaggerating. The monarch mind control program has not been used just to program slaves, but it has been part of a much bigger deception. When this deception is realized by this nation, it will shatter the very fabric of trust that Americans have in their institutions. If Americans will begin to understand the power structure behind their institutions and who controls this structure, they will begin to see the lies in their scripts that have been fed since infancy. And you, the reader of this next section of this book, if you have the love, the truth, can help begin the healing process to overcome some of the devastation that is going to rock this nation when the truth comes out. The next section will help both Christian and non-Christian readers. Therapists can learn about what is happening so that they can better deal with what the SRA survivors are beginning to reveal. The grooming of the American people to believe massive amounts of lies did work until a few loving therapists, ministers, and doctors begin to liberate victims of monarch trauma-based mind control. These programmed multiples began revealing a horror story of deception unparalleled in history. For the reader to deal with this next section means courage. It means that the reader will have to muster up the same type of love of truth that the mind control survivors must muster to free themselves of the lies of their satanic programming. What we see and hear can be programming. In the same way SRA victims are deceived, everyone in the Illuminati of any significance has participated in grooming the public to believe that Billy Graham is a great man of God. Graham has stood behind each of the presidents and the Pope. The Illuminati don't just program individuals, they program whole nations. The public has been led to believe in a television image, but what if the secular media's image of Billy Graham is not real? For Christians, it means that they can quit trusting in a man and place their trust fully on God. For secular readers, they can begin to see the extent of how America's institutions have been corrupted by the horrible trauma-based mind control. The heartbeat of the body of Christ is crying out that something is terribly wrong. We will address that. All of us, whether Christian or not, must step out of the lies and look clearly into the darkness and see every facet of this evil mind control. When men who worship the God of this world place "In God We Trust" on our Federal Reserve banknotes, we who know the truth must step out of our dream world and realize that they mean Lucifer. By the way, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency, but a private banking institution of the Illuminati. This has been documented in a number of writings. The issue at hand in this next section is going to show how the institutions called the Christian Church and the world in general has been deceived by a programmed multiple and this trauma-based mind control. Secular readers will be shown that the doctrines that Christians want to believe in have been subtly destroyed under the disguise of building them up. This is no different than the destruction of the positive values which hold any group together. After the repeated collaboration by essentially all the Christian churches worldwide and many activities as the NCC, the Billy Graham Crusades, the Promise Keepers, and the other programs, the Christian churches, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, and non-denominational, can be considered one institution. The infiltration of control of the Christian religion has been one of the easiest tasks of the Illuminati. The Christian churches are what intelligence agencies called soft targets. So the point of that segment was because I hear all types of misstatements like that religion is false because it is used for control. And that is simply just not the case. It has just been infiltrated and everyone has been subverted. And this monarch mind control is real. It's been done to me. It's been done to you. If you don't think it's been done to you, it's because you don't know about it and you should go learn about it. I talk about it on my channel, and they also talk about it in these videos here. Anatomy of a HARP attack. From mostly cloudy to clear in 20 minutes. I make it a point to take my digital camera with me every time I go out the door. I've been taking pictures of chemtrails and real clouds for a few years now, and I've noticed several distinct changes in the atmosphere whenever chemtrails are sprayed overhead and or when the covert control freaks turn up the juice on those microwave cell phone towers to play God with the weather. I'll point out some of these atmospheric differences in a separate article, but this photo essay will concern itself mostly with a chance capturing on digital film of an all-out HARP assault on the cloud space over Irvine, California on March 12th, 2004, which I serendipitously observed between 2:27 and 2:55 p.m. For readers who are newbies to this subject, HARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project. HARP is supposed to be a joint U.S. Air Force/Navy research development project for defense purposes. In reality, it's another enslavement tool of the New World Order gang. Some background. We've been conditioned to believe that HARP facilities in Alaska and a few other locations around the world are the extent of the HARP transmitters, but Don Croft, Tom Bearden, and others have observed that there is a countrywide network of neighborhood microwave towers tied in with the big HARP facilities to modify cloud cover or alter weather conditions in any state, city, or neighborhood in North America. Anyone who's been observing chemtrails is familiar with the pink appearance of chemtrails at sunset and the unnatural-looking herringbone, cottage cheese, tire tread, or grid effect seen with the upper-level cloud layers under the influence of scalar microwave radiation. Tom Bearden first noticed these odd cloud shapes in 1976 and wrote about the Tesla-based technology that can produce them in his book, Fer de Lance. Tom's article titled Why Scalar Weather Engineering Leaves a Cloud Signature will give you his technological insight on how it works. In addition to the cover story of cell phone transmissions, the hidden purpose behind the explosive construction of microwave towers in the US and all over the world can be broadly divided into two categories: people control and weather control. People, the mind control, mind influencing, emotion influencing, immunity suppression, disease induction, and psychic incapacitation capabilities of these microwave towers have been discussed at my website and in the books and radio interviews of Dr. Nick Begich, Tim Raft, Dr. Byron Weeks, Al Bielek, Tom Berden, and other researchers/writers. You can find many articles and radio interviews about the mind control aspect of microwave towers at this website, and links found on my mind control page, chemtrailplanet.com. Weather. The sequence of photos shown below start with 3 pictures I snapped at 2:27 p.m. from a mall parking lot in Irvine before heading to a health food store to pick up a few things. I took the pictures after getting out of the car because I could see the formerly abundant and healthy columns, cloud formations, meaning white, puffy, and sharp-edged clouds, were beginning to disintegrate rapidly as the edges were becoming soft and amorphous, a telltale sign of the imposition of a DOR polarity orgone energy field upon an OR orgone environment, the type of environment that real clouds need in order to grow and remain intact. That DOR energy field is created by HARP microwave towers when our covert friends turn up the power. While you see blue sky between the columns, the columnous clouds, the cloud formations, nevertheless, covered the entire sky over my head and ran from horizon to horizon in all directions at the time I walked into the store. I came out of the store 20 minutes later and was stunned to see that the sky went completely clear, except for the faintest wisp of white here and there. The sky went completely clear in less than 20 minutes. That simply doesn't happen in nature at this time of the year and at that time of the day. Those clouds should have been building in strength until at least 3:30 or 4 p.m. and gradually dissipate as the sun went down. As I had parked far from the store, it took me about 4 minutes to get back to the car. Put my bags inside, take out the camera, and start shooting. I took the first shot of the cleared sky at 2:55 p.m. Here's the sequence laid out in chronological order. 1, 2:27 p.m. First shot looking west. 2:28 p.m. looking north. Overhead. Right. Clouds completely gone in 20 minutes. So the point of this segment was to prove that HARP attacks are real. And I have experienced them myself. Like, for example, one time a sheet of ice was laid perfectly in just the perfect spot. And above me was, from horizon to horizon, was a completely gray sky. So I do believe that that ice laid in front of me, while I had an idiot driving a car, he floored it onto the ice because it was put in a specific spot where the idiot driving the car would do that. And I almost died that day. But of course, my faith kept me alive. But yeah, whenever it's clear skies and then you wake up 2 hours later and the skies are completely gray from horizon to horizon, that's not normal.
What we're looking at here since we last talked is really an extrapolation, an extension, a continuing unveiling of the most sophisticated mass scientific mind control and social engineering that the world has probably ever seen and may ever see ever, because I don't think it's going to last too much longer before it comes down on itself. But the media, you remember when it was said that the Marshall McLuhan said the message is the media or the medium. Yeah. All right, well, it was TV. And just as some people were beginning to grasp the overwhelming power and influence and psychological, emotional, mental, spiritual subjugation of that media, TV, along comes the internet, which I think geometrically takes the issue of mass control and influencing that much farther. And then we can, of course, stir into the pot that cauldron of hell, cell phone radiation, electromagnetic fields which literally drown us. We're living in a fishbowl. 150 years ago, there was no EMF to speak of, except for a few lightning strikes and maybe something from space that dropped in now and then. But we are living in an environment that the human body simply cannot adapt to quickly enough. And the controllers are, 20, 30 years ahead, 40 years ahead in some disciplines, maybe 10 years ahead in others. But the idea of controlling the human mind now is so advanced and so exacting, I'm sure it would have shaken Edward L. Bernays in his grave if he were to be woken and told about it. I mean, it's just amazing what's going on. You see that as well as anybody.
Oh, yes. I've been observing it for years, and of course, I've studied it extensively, and they took one of my inventions and put it under secrecy for years, because some of the technologies I've developed can be used for mind control. They can also be used for the greatest good that the human being has ever seen. That's always a two-edged sword, when you develop.
The human being will never see in this case unless the planet is completely turned over and retooled to put good on the throne of evil. And I don't see that happening anytime soon, although I'd love for it to happen. I don't mean to sound negative, but it is what it is right now, and we are in the hands of people who do not particularly care about the value of human life, happiness, integrity, or anything else.
Well, that's true. And, it's Iblis fair seeming. All the TV shows and movies program people. They think that the darkness wins, and that it's good to have no integrity. The people with no integrity, they're always, they're rich, they drive the best cars, and they end up, winning and beating the other people out. So greed is good. And then
greed wins. Greed is good, and that message goes in on several levels. And remember, it is also being enfolded and embedded into the subconscious through these technologies we've briefly mentioned. We'll get into that more as we continue.
Exactly. Yeah, the technology's reinforced, so we're getting it subconsciously and we're getting it consciously on multi-levels. The TV sets, scan rates, and, are designed to put people into, alpha states or below, and hypnotic trance, and then they've got the modulations coming from the Wi-Fi towers, and the modulations coming in through subliminal programming on the TV sets, and then also through the power lines. There's plenty.
Now
of,
let me say one thing, and then I would like you to please tell us that anecdote again. That is a classic, and it's crucial, and it was many years ago. Now, the idea that the human mind is an electronic organism, an electronic machine, is certainly not what most people envision. They think we're chemical first, what we eat is crucial and all that. It is crucial, but we're electrical first and chemical second. And they, being the scientists who are behind this effort to control people, have decoded much, if not all, of the valuable parts of the human emotion spectrum. The emotional spectrum is known in terms of hertz, megahertz, and other kinds of electromagnetic radiation and frequencies, and can be programmed. We know that people who go near secure military installations will all of a sudden become very nervous and frightened and want to leave. They want to get the hell out of there. And that's because the frequency for fear is being broadcast on a perimeter basis all around that facility. This is really older technology. It's not new. Now, what Pat just said is critical. We all know about cell phone towers. We know about the Gwen towers. We know about satellite applications of electromagnetic fields. We know about the HARP program to pump up into the ionosphere tremendous amounts of electronic energy and then use that to beam back down specific and selected frequencies which can affect small groups or large groups of peoples and populations. But there's another main platform, a main venue, that these kinds of frequencies are actually placed into the human mind at very close range, and it's called the power grid. And Pat was the first one that I ever knew to figure it out. So tell us that story about how those nice, friendly 60 hertz wires in your walls and your 60 hertz powered electronic devices in your home can have a dual purpose at the very least.
Well, John Lilly was a good friend of mine. We worked together for the Navy on dolphin projects, and John Lilly developed technologies for bypassing the mechanisms of the human brain that resist programming. And he developed, I'll tell it this way. My friend Adam Trombley was also a friend of John Lilly's, and he was in Hawaii looking at the power grid, and there are signals coming in the power grid that have some ultrasonic waveforms and certain wave shape, and so Adam was looking at this grid on the power line, and I was.
He went over. He went over to Lilly's lab, didn't he? And there was a screen showing a waveform. Wasn't that the way it went?
Lilly walked into to Adam Trombley's house,
okay.
And Adam Trombley had the waveform up on the screen.
I see.
And John said to Adam, he said, "Oh, you know about my waveform?" And Adam said, "What are you talking about?" And then Adam said, "No, this is coming in on a power grid." And then John Lilly said, "Oh, so that's what they're doing with my waveform, the Lilly wave." And if you Google the Lilly wave, you'll find just one reference to it. But basically, it's a waveform that enables you to bypass the resistance of the human mind and program the brain. And you can transmit fear, you can transmit any emotion, any kind of information you want on the Lilly wave. And basically, Adam had discovered that they're using it through the power grid, and subsequently I've been all over the country, all over the world, and measured these things, and apparently there are black boxes in the power companies that produce the Lilly wave, and they're associated with, Homeland Security or whatever. And basically, these devices put ultrasonic waveform pulses riding on top of the regular 60 hertz wave. And they are mind control waves, and they're coming into everybody's house.
So the Lily wave basically disarms the brain's ability to discern and decide. It just puts it in a neutral state where things just flow right in, much like the flicker of the old TV set will do. First time you watch TV, it takes about 2 minutes to get into that altered state. It's not beta, it's down in the alpha, almost theta range. You become really a zombie, and then after the first time, it's a matter of seconds. The second time you watch television, you're taken right into that state where things can pour right into your subconscious mind. So the Lily wave was used first to disarm the mind, and then your theory is, and Lily's, and I'm sure Adam's as well, is that the Lily wave was then piggybacked with any kind of known decoded electronic signature that would cause a reaction in the human brain and consciousness. Fascinating.
Well, that is correct, and we know the signatures for every emotional state. The signature of fear, the signature of bliss, the signature of anger. All of these signatures are very easy to duplicate, recreate, and you can, disarm with the Lily wave. It goes right in, and then you put whatever you want in there, plus whatever subliminal programming you want. You can create unrest, you can create civil unrest, you can create riots, you can do anything you want.
And the amazing part about it is it can also disarm the brain to the extent that the other platforms, cell towers, the Gwen towers, HARP, can also pump up and pump out any number of electronic frequencies that will then have a free ride and entree right into the human mind en masse. This is not just an isolated issue. It's an amazing thing to consider. We are under such control and influence that the average American, the sheep, will never figure it out. Here's a little piece on the Lily wave and why it is the wave of choice, the wave form of choice. The goal was to find an electric current waveform with which animals, that can be us, could be stimulated through implanted electrodes for several hours per day for several months, without causing irreversible changes in the threshold by the passage of current through the tissue. All right? Many waveforms, including 60 cycles per second sine wave current, could apparently be used safely for these limited schedules of stimulation. They could not be used for the intensive long-term schedule of chronic stimulation. Electric current passed through the brain can cause at least two distinct types of injury, thermal and electrolytic. The technical problem in chronic brain stimulation, and they're using electrodes in this particular study I'm reading about, is to stay above the excitatory threshold and below the injury threshold in the neuronal system under consideration. This result can be achieved most easily by the proper choice of waveforms and their time courses, and less easily by the choice of the range of repetition frequencies and trained durations. So they worked on this and came up with this final statement. The previous waveforms used in neurophysiology and in neurosurgery injured the neurons when unidirectional current passed through the brain. Dr. Lilly developed a new electrical waveform to balance the current, first in one direction and then, after a brief interval, in the other. Thus, ions moving in the neurons would first be pushed one way and then quickly the other, stimulating the neurons and leaving the ions in their former positions within the neurons. This new waveform was called a balanced bidirectional pulse pair, or the Lily wave. Now, what we're talking about here is the Lily wave has been introduced and basically piggybacked on 60 hertz AC, which is in every home, every office, every building. And the idea is that it transmits it. We do know from an electronic reading of any 60 hertz power box with a simple EMF meter, you can pick up electromagnetic fields 5, 6, 7 feet away. So people who are living in a box, in a hamster cage, which is a bedroom, an office, a living room, are surrounded with this stuff. And if they send the Lily wave in, piggybacked on top of it with other, well, we won't call them control, but we can call them influential frequencies, we have the perfect way to directly affect masses of people in their homes, offices, and other structures where they hang out. Pat, go ahead.
Well, that is correct, and it's used in multi-levels. It's used in microwaves also. Microwave stimulation of the brain. The problem with stimulating the brain continuously with microwave or control frequencies is that you can cause damage. You don't want to damage people's brain unless that's your intent.
But they're doing a good enough job on their own.
Yeah, but basically the idea is to stimulate, transmit the information in, return the nerves to their former state, and then the brain doesn't resist it. Because if the same signal keeps coming in over time, the body can develop a defense against it. The Lilly wave is a waveform that prevents you from building any kind of defense.
Clouds and electromagnetic energy, chemtrails, aerosol, poor monkey. Give me the money in 3 months, she says, and I'll be able to affect the behavior of 80% of the people in this town without their knowing it. Excerpts from Mind Control. In California, it was discovered by Dr. Ade that animal brain waves could be altered directly by ELF fields. It was found that monkey brains would fall in phase with ELF waves. These waves could easily pass through the skull, which normally protected the central nervous system from outside influence. In San Leonardo, Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, director of the Technic Research Laboratory, has been doing ELF/brain research with human subjects for some time. One of the frequencies produced is nausea for more than an hour. Another frequency, she calls it the marijuana frequency, gets people laughing. Give me the money in 3 months, she says, and I'll be able to affect the behavior of 80% of the people in this town without their knowing it. The American public was never informed that the military had planned to develop electromagnetic weapons until 1982, when the revelation appeared in a technical Air Force magazine. The magazine article stated, specifically generated radio frequency radiation, RFR, fields may pose powerful and revolutionary anti-personnel military trends. The article indicated that it would be very easy to use electromagnetic fields to disrupt the human brain because the brain itself was an electrically mediated organ. It further indicated that a rapidly scanning RFR system would have a stunning or killing capability over a large area. The system was developable. Navy Captain Dr. Paul E. Taylor read a paper at the Air University Center for Aerospace Doctrine, Research and Education at Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama. Dr. Taylor was responsible for the Navy's radiation laboratory and had been studying radiation effects on humans. In his paper, Dr. Taylor stated, the abilities of individuals to function as soldiers could be degraded to such a point that would be combat ineffective. The system was so sophisticated that it employed microwaves and millimeter waves and was transportable by a large truck. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in the South Bay are working on the development of a brain bomb. A bomb could be dropped in the middle of a battlefield, which would produce microwaves, incapacitating the minds of soldiers within a circumscribed area. Applications of microwave technology in espionage were available for over 25 years. In a meeting in Berkeley of the American Association of the Advancement of Science as early as 1965, Professor J. Anthony Deutsch of New York University provided an important segment of research in the field of memory control. In layman terms, Professor Deutsch indicated that the mind is a transmitter, and if too much information is received, like too many vehicles on a crowded freeway, the brain ceases to transmit. The professor indicated that an excess of acetylcholine choline in the brain can interfere with memory processes and control. He indicated excess amounts of acetylcholine can be artificially produced through both administration of drugs or through the use of radio waves. This process is called electronic dissolution of memory, EDOM. The memory transmissions can be stopped for as long as the radio signal continues. As a result, the awareness of the person skips over those minutes during which he is subjected to the radio signal. Memory is distorted, and time orientation is destroyed. According to Lincoln Lawrence, author of Were We Controlled? EDOM is now operational. There is already in use a small EDOM generator transmitter, which can be concealed on the body of a person. Contact with this person, a casual handshake, or even just a touch transmits a tiny electric charge, plus an ultrasonic signal tone, which for a short period will disturb the time orientation of the person affected. It can be a potent weapon for hopelessly confusing evidence in the investigation of a crime. 30 years ago, Alan Frey discovered that microwaves of 300 to 3000 megahertz could be heard by people even if they were deaf, if pulsed at a certain rate, appearing to be originating in the back of the head. The sound boomed, clicked, hissed, or buzzed, depending on the frequency. Later research was shown that the perception of the waves take place in front of the ears. The microwave causes pressure waves in the brain tissue, and this phenomenon vibrates the sound receptors in the inner ear through the bone structure. Some microwaves are capable of directly stimulating the nerve cells of the auditory pathways. This has been confirmed with experiments with rats, in which the sound registers 120 decibels, which is equal to the volume of a nearby jet during takeoff. Aside from having the capability of causing pain and preventing auditory communication, a more subtle effect was demonstrated at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research by Dr. Joseph C. Sharp. Dr. Sharp himself was the subject of an experiment in which pulsed microwave audiograms or the microwave analog of the sound vibration of spoken words, were delivered to his brain in such a way that he was able to understand the words that were spoken. Military and undercover uses of such device might include driving a subject crazy with inner voices in order to discredit him, or conveying undetectable instructions to a programmed assassin. But the technology has been carried even a step further. It has been demonstrated by Dr. Ross Aday that microwaves can be used directly to bring about changes in the electrical patterns of different parts of the brain. His experiments showed that he could achieve the same mind control over animals as Dr. Delgado did in the bull incident. Dr. Delgado used brain implants in his animals. Dr. Aday used microwave devices without preconditioning. He made animals act and look like electronic toys. I realized that I have like a crazy headache and I can barely think. And the thoughts keep getting snapped out of my brain. And yeah, I woke up today feeling very horrible. So I do think that something was up, you know, because that's how it feels. All right. Like, it's like the brain waves in my brain were very clearly being attacked when I woke up. And seems to me like they definitely do not want me to make this video. Right, the point of this segment was to prove that the mind control attacks are there. They are being done through the HARP aerosol chemtrail clouds, the HARP towers, which we think are cell phone towers, and our smart meters, and all these other things in the house that we think are normal are actually Trojan horses, so to speak. And I do think that this type of mind control is being done to all of us, but it is being done on a weaker scale at mass, and for that reason, it can be avoided. Mind control, the ultimate brave new world. Technologies for stimulating the brain and controlling the mind can have benefits, but they have a dark side that the military and intelligence planners have been exploiting for decades. It would also appear possible to create high-fidelity speech in the human body, raising the possibility of covert suggestion and psychological direction. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them. That's what we saw the whistleblower talk about, right? The military and others interested in such things have also focused a large amount of research into this area for the purpose of enhancing the performance of soldiers while degrading the performance of adversaries. Electronic mind control, the facts, the proof. Military development of remote mind control technology. Remote mind control technology. Remote viewing. Civilian populations now a virtual playground for unethical military and intelligence experiments, thanks to advanced electronics. electromagnetic weapons and mind control, technologies of control for world domination, CIA and Vatican, holographic projection technology, satanic and microwave torture of a Christian, aerial mind control, the threat to civil liberties, by Judy Waugh. Excerpts from the Nexus magazine, October-November 1999. The U.S. Air Force's command solo aircraft are used to broadcast subliminal radio frequency messages to manipulate the minds of military and civilian targets. USAF Command Solo Aerial Mind Control Broadcasts. The United States Air Force uses aerial mind control broadcasts against civilian populations as well as enemy troops. Some of these actions against civilians are done with the intent of influencing public opinion and the outcome of elections. In a previous article, we examined mind control technology, especially those that are utilizing silent sounds in which radio frequency broadcasts carry subliminal patterns that entrain the listener's brainwaves into a pre-selected emotional state. According to ITV Wire Service reports, this technology was used during Operation Desert Storm in 1991 as part of U.S. psychological operations directed against Iraqi troops. To the Desert Storm offensive, we can now add several other incidences. Alex Huvat, the editor of Probe, calls to our attention the 1998 video Exotic Weapons of Mass Control, produced by Bob Fletcher. The excerpt played on Fletcher's video is from TLC and clearly states that Command Solo was used in Haiti for what was called Operation Uphold Democracy, as the general populace was violently opposed to Aristide and most in favor of his ouster. It took nearly a year of this clandestine counter-programming to get them to change their minds. Instead of butchering a population physically, you can now manipulate them mentally, virtually enslaving their thoughts with a crisscross pattern of flights by an EC-130, which is just a C-130 heavily laden with electronic hardware. We were not at war with the citizens of Haiti, yet the U.S. government directed military weapons against this friendly, or at least neutral, civilian population. The U.S. government sanctioned the rigging of the Haitian election by mental control of the people, programming them to cast their votes for the Americans' favored candidate, and they had the nerve to call it Operation Uphold Democracy. Some sense of humor. Stalin would have loved it. Hitler would have loved it. Why is the U.S. government doing this? Who is behind this flagrant violation of civil liberties? Is it the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, which has a long history of interfering in foreign government politics? Or has this become standard military procedure? This rationale is always the same: to make the world safe for democracy. Yet what is democracy if not freedom? Freedom to think your own thoughts, freedom to express your own opinions, freedom to vote for the candidates of your own choice. Fletcher's video also mentions that the same technology was used against the Bosnia population for a week to influence their election. This was probably done during Operation Joint Guard in 1995. The questions arise: if they have used mind control broadcast against foreign civilian populations to influence elections, will they use them against American citizens, or have they already? what other countries may be the recipients of this innovative technology. The unit flyaway cost of this plane is more than $100 million each. Air Force Mission Command Solo conducts psychological operation and civil affairs broadcast missions in the standard AM, FM, HF, TV, and military communication bands. Missions are flown at maximum altitudes possible to ensure optimum propagation patterns. The EC-130 flies during either day or night scenarios with equal success. And the air is refuelable. A typical mission consists of a single ship orbit, which is offset from the desired target audience. The target may either be military or civilian personnel. Secondary missions include command and control communication countermeasures and limited intelligence gathering. The capability of broadcasting color television on a multitude of worldwide standards throughout TV, VHF, UHF ranges. Air Force background, Air National Guard EC-130 aircraft flown by the 193rd Special Operations Group were deployed both to Saudi Arabia and Turkey in support of Desert Storm. Their missions included broadcasts of Voice of the Gulf and other programs intended to convince Iraqi soldiers to surrender. Volant Solo, as the mission is now known, was instrumental in the success of coordinated psychological operations and Operations Just Cause, again, broadcasting continuously throughout the initial phases of the operation. The point of this segment was not only to prove things like aerial mind control, but because I believe that they don't even have to use the plane anymore. Because you have a phone in your pocket and the cell tower is out in the neighborhood. A former KGB agent named Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov claimed that in 1984 that Russia has a long-term goal of ideologically subverting the US. He describes the process as a great brainwashing that has 4 basic stages. The first stage, he said, is called demoralization, which would take about 20 years to achieve. Once demoralization is completed, the second stage of ideological brainwashing is destabilization. The third stage would be crisis. It would only take up to 6 weeks to send a country into crisis, explained Bezmenov. The crisis would bring a violent change of power, structure, and economy, and will be followed by the last stage, normalization. That's when your country is basically taken over, living under a new ideology and reality. I will end this video with Behold a Pale Horse, excerpts from Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Diversion, the primary strategy. Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of basic systems, principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logics, systems, design, and economics, and discouraging technical creativity. Engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities by A. Unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape, by way of constant barrage of sex, violence, and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers. B. Giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. 3. Rewriting history and law and subjecting the public to the deviant creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. These preclude their interests and discovery of the silent weapons of social automation technology. The general rule is that there is profit and confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems, then offer the solutions. Diversion summary. Media. Keep the adult public attention diverted away from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Schools. Keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law, and real history. Entertainment. Keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. Work. Keep the public busy, busy, busy with no time to think. Back on the farm with the other animals. Consent. The primary victory. A silent weapons system operates upon data obtained from a docile public by legal but not always lawful force. Much information is made available to silent weapons systems programmers through the Internal Revenue Source, IRS. This information consists of the enforced delivery of well-organized data contained in federal and tax forms collected, assembled and submitted by slave labor, provided by taxpayers and employers. Furthermore, the number of such forms submitted to the IRS is a useful indicator of public consent, an important factor in strategic decision-making. Other data sources are given in the short lists of inputs. Consent, coefficients, numerical feedback indicating victory status, psychological basis. When the government is able to collect tax and seize private property without just compensation, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and consenting to enslavement and legal enroachment. A good and easily quantified indicator of the harvest time is the number of public citizens who pay income tax despite an obvious lack of rhetorical or honest services from the government. System analysis. In order to make meaningful computerized economic decisions about war, the primary economic flywheel, it is necessary to assign concrete logistical values to each element of the war, structure, personnel, and material alike. This process begins with a clear and candid description of the subsystems of such a structure. End of excerpt. William Cooper's author note. So now you know this chapter could only come in the beginning. Your preconceived ideas had to be shattered in order for you to understand the rest of this book. In this chapter, you can see every step that the elite have taken in their war to control this once great nation. You can see the steps that will be taken in the future. You can no longer pretend innocence. Your denial of the conspiracy will fall on deaf ears. This book is part of the education that will give Americans the weapons needed in the coming months and years of hardships as the new world order struggles to be born. Many will argue that silent weapons for quiet wars is only a bogus conglomeration of words for which the writer has never taken credit or responsibility. Those who do so ignore the self-evident truths contained within the document. They ignore these truths because they are an indicament of their own ignorance, which they cannot face. The document, first found in 1969, correctly outlines events which subsequently came to pass. It cannot be ignored or dismissed. The document is genuine. Its truths cannot be negated or shrugged away. The message is this: you must accept that you have been cattle, and the ultimate consequence of being cattle, which is slavery, or you must prepare to fight, and if necessary, die to preserve your God-given right to freedom. The last sentence is the real reason why people choose to ignore silent weapons for quiet wars. People are not ready to admit that they have been cattle. They are not prepared to fight, and if necessary, die for freedom. Indicament of the citizens of the United States of America, and that it is total confirmation of the truth of the information contained in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. So the purpose of this segment was to highlight the document Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, because that document does tell you their plans. And if you have eyes and know how to read, then you can see that this has clearly been planned, the society we are living in. Basically, in conclusion, your phone camera is watching every last move you make and every last muscle reaction to the things it's showing you. And every last bit of that data and information is being used against you constantly, 24/7, to predict your behaviors, induce trauma-based mind control, and kill what you could be. All right? And of course, there's a whole lot of other aspects, right? But as soon as you learn to recognize the architecture of control, the control will slip. Okay, the mind control will become optional. Okay, and the key to discovering and understanding that mind control is on my channel. It's on all the other channels I've provided and all the proof I've provided. But yeah, the key to awakening lies in this channel. It lies in making the decision, the conscious decision, to choose good over your own selfish desires. There is one AI that has all algorithms, and the reason that you don't care is because you are desensitized.